Hey, what is up, everyone? Today we got a pretty cool story. It's narrated by Frederick Surrey. So get cozy, enjoy it, and watch it till the end, guys.
In the vast darkness of the 41st millennium, where humanity clings to survival across a million worlds, there exists a truth that many overlook. It is a truth written not in the thunder of bolter fire or the glory of chapter banners, but in the grinding machinery of forge worlds, in the tread of god engines that shake continents, and in the cold calculations of tech priests who hold the very keys to the Imperium's continued existence. The Space Marines stand as humanity's greatest warriors, angels of death fashioned by the Emperor's own hand. Their legends echo through the centuries, tales of impossible heroism and unwavering devotion. Yet for all their might, for all the gene-wrought power that courses through their veins and the sacred armor that encases their superhuman frames, they remain dependent upon another force. A force that operates in shadows of smoke and radiation, that speaks in binary cant and machine prayer, that commands technologies so vast and terrible that even the Adeptus Astartes must bow before them. The Adeptus Mechanicus does not merely support the Imperium's war machine. They are the war machine, in every sense that matters. And understanding why requires us to look beyond the surface glory of Space Marine victories, beyond the chaplain's battle hymns and the tactical genius of chapter masters, to see the infrastructure of power that makes those victories possible in the first place. Let us begin this journey not with comparisons, but with understanding. Understanding of what the Mechanicus truly is, what forces they command, and why their strength eclipses even the mighty Adeptus Astartes. The birth of the machine cult. Long before the Emperor walked among the stars, before the first Space Marine Legion drew breath, Mars had already become something other than human. During the Age of Strife, when warp storms tore the galaxy asunder and old night descended upon humanity's scattered colonies, the survivors on the Red Planet turned to technology, not just as a tool, but as salvation itself. They forged something new from the ashes of fallen civilization, a religion that married faith with function, prayer with protocol, devotion with data. The cult Mechanicus arose from necessity and desperation. Mars had once been terraformed during the dark age of technology, its surface covered with breathable atmosphere and thriving ecosystems that rivaled ancient Terra. But the wars of the Age of Strife destroyed all of that, reducing the planet to its primordial desert state. The survivors adapted by going underground, by building vast forge complexes that stretched across the planet's surface like mechanical mountains, by replacing their failing flesh with enduring steel. They developed a worldview fundamentally different from other human cultures that emerged during that terrible age. To the tech priests of Mars, knowledge became the highest form of devotion. The machine became not merely a tool, but a manifestation of the divine. They worshipped the Omnissiah, the machine god, whose mysteries they sought to unlock through study, ritual, and the slow accumulation of ancient wisdom. Innovation became heresy, for who were mere mortals to improve upon the works of the ancients? Instead, they became archaeologists of their own civilization, seeking to recover what was lost rather than create what was new. When the Emperor united Terra and turned his eyes toward Mars, he found not a world of desperate survivors to be conquered, but an empire unto itself. The Mechanicum, as it was then known, controlled not just Mars but dozens of forge worlds scattered across the void, each one a manufacturing powerhouse capable of producing weapons and equipment that dwarfed anything Terra could offer. They possessed knowledge that even the Emperor's own scientists could not match. Repositories of data stretching back to humanity's golden age. The Emperor could have tried to conquer Mars through force of arms. His Thunder Warriors and Custodians might have succeeded, given time and terrible cost. But the Emperor, for all his many failings, understood the value of what Mars possessed. So instead of conquest, he offered alliance. In the chambers beneath Olympus Mons, the Treaty of Mars was signed, an agreement that would shape the Imperium for the next 10 millennia. This treaty granted the Mechanicum unprecedented autonomy within the nascent Imperium. They would maintain their own religion, their own hierarchy, their own laws. They would not be subject to the imperial tithe that demanded soldiers from other worlds. In exchange, they would equip the Emperor's armies, build his ships, and provide the technological expertise that would make the Great Crusade possible. Many saw the Emperor's hand in this bargain. Literally, the tech priests declared him to be the Omnissiah made manifest, the earthly avatar of the machine god. Whether this was genuine religious fervor, political convenience, or some combination of both remains a matter of debate. What matters is that it worked. The Mechanicum provided the weapons and armor for the Space Marine legions, built the mighty warships of the Great Crusade's expeditionary fleets, and sent their Titan legions to fight alongside the Emperor's warriors. This relationship survived even the devastation of the Horus heresy, though not without cost. Mars became a battleground between loyalist and traitor forces, the Mechanicum splitting just as the Space Marine legions had. When the dust settled and the traitors fled to the Eye of Terror, what remained became the Adeptus Mechanicus, officially separate and distinct from its corrupted counterpart, yet still maintaining the autonomy granted by the ancient treaty. Over the following millennia, the Adeptus Mechanicus only grew in power and influence. They established forge worlds across the galaxy, each one a sovereign domain, answering ultimately to Mars. They maintained control over all advanced technology, from the humble lasgun to the godlike Titans. They became indispensable to the Imperium's survival, so thoroughly integrated into every aspect of its military and industrial infrastructure that to lose them would mean the collapse of humanity's galactic domain. Understanding this history is crucial to understanding the Mechanicus' strength. They are not merely servants of the Imperium, not simply another branch of the imperial government. They are partners, equals in all but name, commanding resources and wielding power that rivals the Adeptus Terra itself. And at the heart of this power lie the Forge Worlds, those hellish industrial planets where miracles of technology are manufactured on a scale that defies comprehension. Titan legions, gods among men. To truly grasp the military might of the Adeptus Mechanicus, one must first understand the Titans. These walking cathedrals of destruction represent the pinnacle of imperial military technology, god engines that stride across battlefields like the wrath of the machine god made manifest. Each one carries more firepower than entire companies of space marines, houses, crews numbering in the dozens or hundreds, and can turn the tide of wars through their mere presence. The smallest of the Titans, the Warhound-class Scout Titan, stands approximately 14 meters tall. To put this in perspective, a space marine, in power armor, towers over normal humans at around 8 feet. A Warhound Scout Titan would dwarf a space marine the way that space marine dwarfs an ordinary man. These smallest Titans carry weapons capable of annihilating tanks with single shots, void shields that can shrug off artillery barrages, and move with a speed that belies their tremendous bulk. Above the Warhounds come the Reaver-class Battle Titans, standing approximately 22 meters tall. These war machines serve as the backbone of Titan legions, combining formidable firepower with solid armor and respectable speed. A single Reaver can level buildings, destroy enemy armor formations, and serve as a mobile command center for Imperial forces. Then there are the Warlord-class Battle Titans, the most common of the true Battle Titans. Sources vary on their exact height, with some placing them at approximately 33 meters, while others suggest they tower over 100 meters. Regardless of which measurement proves accurate, a Warlord-class Titan represents a concentration of destructive power that few enemies can match. Armed with weapons like plasma destructors, volcano cannons, and defense lasers, a single Warlord can devastate entire enemy formations. Its void shields can weather sustained attacks from heavy artillery. Its armor can withstand direct hits from weapons that would obliterate lesser war engines. Most Warlord Titans serve as the command units for maniples, tactical formations of Titans working in concert. Their crews are among the most experienced and skilled in the Collegia Titanica, chosen for their ability to coordinate complex battlefield maneuvers while managing the tremendous systems of their god engines. But even warlords pale before the truly massive classes of Titans. The Warmaster class Heavy Battle Titan stands approximately 41 meters tall, looming over even the mighty warlords. These Titans are equipped with Suzerain-class plasma destructors that can reduce anything they hit to molten slag, along with Revelator missile launchers and turbo laser destructors that add to their apocalyptic firepower. Protected by 7 void shield generators and served by multiple servitor clades for damage control, a Warmaster-class Titan represents mobile firepower on a scale that can alter the strategic balance of entire campaigns. And then there are the Emperor-class Titans, the largest and most powerful war engines the Imperium can deploy. These god engines exist in 2 known variants, the Imperator class and the Warmonger class. Sources disagree on their exact dimensions, with measurements ranging from 43 meters to over 140 meters in height, though the most commonly cited figure places them at approximately 55 meters tall, with cathedrals on their backs. The Imperator-class Emperor Titan serves as a mobile fortress and command center. Its interior is vast enough to house not just its crew but entire companies of Imperial Guard infantry or Skitari, dozens of Space Marines, or hundreds of servitors. The Titan Legion's Grand Master often commands from within an Imperator, using it as a mobile headquarters from which to coordinate the movements of entire Titan legions. The weapons mounted on an Imperator-class Titan defy easy description. Its arm weapons can include plasma annihilators capable of boiling away atmosphere, apocalypse missile launchers that rain down city-killing ordnance, and defense lasers that can carve through void-shielded warships. Its carapace mounts quad turrets, additional missile batteries, and defensive weapons designed to sweep infantry and light vehicles from its massive feet. When an Imperator Titan fires its full armament, the resulting devastation can be seen from orbit. The Warmonger-class Emperor Titan shares the Imperator's tremendous size but focuses on long-range fire support rather than tactical flexibility. Its weapons are configured for maximum range and sustained bombardment, allowing it to devastate enemy formations from distances that put it safely beyond retaliation from all but the largest enemy guns. Both types of Emperor Titan can transport troops internally, deploy them into strategic positions, and provide them with fire support that makes orbital bombardment seem restrained by comparison. The mere presence of an Emperor Titan on the battlefield forces enemies to make terrible choices, engage the God Engine and suffer devastating casualties, or ignore it and watch it systematically dismantle your forces from a position of complete superiority. The Adeptus Mechanicus controls all of these war engines through the Collegia Titanica, also known as the Adeptus Titanicus. Every Titan Legion swears its primary loyalty to Mars and the Omnissiah, not to the Adeptus Terra or the Imperium at large. While Titan Legions often fight alongside Imperial forces and answer requests for aid from the wider Imperium, their ultimate allegiance remains with the Mechanicus. This becomes crucial when considering comparative military strength. A Space Marine chapter, even at full strength of 1,000 battle brothers, cannot match the destructive potential of a single Titan Legion. The largest chapters, those few that maintain forces beyond the Codex Astartes mandated limits, still pale before the sheer firepower that a Titan maniple can deploy. Consider a typical engagement. A Space Marine company, consisting of 100 battle brothers supported by vehicles and equipment, launches an assault on an enemy stronghold. They fight with tactical brilliance, using drop pods and Thunderhawk gunships to deploy exactly where they can cause maximum damage. They employ devastating close-range firepower and surgical precision strikes. Against most enemies, they would achieve complete victory. Now imagine the same target engaged by a Titan maniple consisting of 1 Warlord-class Titan, 2 Reaver-class Titans, and 4 Warhound-class Scout Titans. The Warhounds would scout the approaches, identify defensive positions, and begin suppressing enemy fire. The Reavers would advance under the covering fire, their weapons systematically dismantling fortifications and eliminating armor. The Warlord would stride forward last, its volcano cannons and plasma destructors, reducing the stronghold itself to molten slag and radioactive ash. The time required for the Titan attack? Minutes, not hours. The casualties suffered? Minimal, unless the enemy possessed anti-Titan weapons or Titans of their own. The thoroughness of the destruction? Absolute. This is not to diminish Space Marine capabilities. The Adeptus Astartes excel at operations requiring precision, speed, and flexibility. They can deploy anywhere, strike hard, and extract before enemy reinforcements arrive. They can operate independently for extended periods, adapt to changing battlefield conditions, and make tactical decisions that no amount of pre-programming could replicate. But when raw destructive power matters, when the objective is not surgical precision, but overwhelming force, the Titans of the Mechanicus stand supreme. And this represents just one aspect of Mechanicus military might. One tool in an arsenal that spans from individual Skitarii warriors to world-ending superweapons. The Titan legions also possess another advantage that often goes unmentioned in comparisons of military strength: their ability to operate independently of Imperial support infrastructure. A Titan legion brings its own maintenance staff, its own fuel supplies, its own defensive troops, in the form of Secutarii and Skitarii attachments. When a Titan legion deploys to a war zone, it arrives as a self-contained military force capable of sustained operations without requiring support from local Imperial forces. Space Marines, for all their vaunted independence, still require resupply and maintenance support that ultimately traces back to Mechanicus Forge worlds. Their bolters need ammunition manufactured to exacting specifications. Their power armor requires replacement parts that only Mechanicus tech priests can properly consecrate and install. Their vehicles and ships depend on technologies that the Mechanicus alone fully understands. The Titan legions suffer from no such dependency. They are the Mechanicus, and the Mechanicus provides for its own. The Skitarii, an army beyond counting. While the Titan legions represent the most visible and dramatic expression of Mechanicus military power, they are far from the only force at the Adeptus Mechanicus's command. The Skitarii legions, also known as the Legiones Skitarii or Tech Guard, form the cybernetic infantry forces that defend Forge worlds, accompany tech priest expeditions, and serve as the ground forces for Mechanicus military operations across the galaxy. Each Forge world maintains its own Skitarii legion, divided into macroclades, which are in turn broken down into cohorts and maniples. The organizational structure varies from Forge world to Forge world, as each tech priest Magos, who raises a Skitarii force, does so according to their own preferences and needs. This decentralization means that precise numbers for Skitarii forces across the Imperium remain impossible to calculate. But conservative estimates suggest that the Mechanicus fields Skitarii forces, numbering in the billions across hundreds of Forge worlds. To understand what makes the Skitarii so formidable, one must first understand what they are. These are not simple soldiers given lasguns and sent into battle. The Skitarii are cybernetically enhanced warriors, their bodies extensively modified with machine components that grant them capabilities far beyond those of unaugmented humans or even Imperial Guard veterans. The transformation into a Skitarius begins with selection, which varies wildly across different Forge worlds. Some Skitarii begin as volunteers who come to the cult Mechanicus, seeking transformation, offering their flesh to the machine god in exchange for the strength of steel. Others are recruited from factory workers whose bodies have been broken by industrial accidents, given the choice between becoming servitors or Skitarii. Still others are bred specifically for the role through eugenics programs that emphasize aggression and physical resilience. The conversion process itself remains one of the closely guarded secrets of the Mechanicus, but its results are well documented. A completed Skitarius possesses reflexes enhanced by neural implants, strength augmented by pneumatic servos and enhanced musculature, endurance that allows them to march for months without rest, and sensory capabilities that far exceed human norms. Many Skitarii have their emotions dampened or removed entirely through brain surgery and psychological conditioning, creating warriors who feel neither fear nor doubt, who follow orders with machine precision, and who will fight until their augmented bodies finally cease to function. Skitarii Rangers represent the most common variant, specialized in long-range combat and reconnaissance. These warriors can hunt their prey for decades if necessary, their modified bodies requiring minimal sustenance and their augmented senses able to track targets across hostile terrain that would kill unmodified humans. Armed with galvanic rifles that fire electromagnetically accelerated rounds, rangers can engage enemies at ranges that leave opponents unable to effectively return fire. Skitarii Vanguard serve as the Mechanicus's frontline assault troops, often called rad troopers, due to the radiation they emit from their gear. These warriors carry radium carbines and generate fields of radiation so intense that enemies weaken simply by standing near them. The radiation that would kill unaugmented humans in minutes barely affects the Vanguard, their bodies hardened against the very weapons they wield. In close combat, even lightly armed Vanguard prove surprisingly resilient, their radiation fields sapping enemy strength, while their cybernetic enhancements allow them to shrug off wounds that would cripple normal soldiers. Supporting these core troops are specialized Skitarii forces, Sicarian ruststalkers, and infiltrators who excel at close-quarters combat and assassination, Cerberus, raiders, and sulfur hounds, who provide mobile firepower on their mechanical mounts, Taraxii sterilizers, and skystalkers, who take to the air on carbon fiber wings, and Cataphron breachers and destroyers, heavily armored cyborgs that serve as mobile weapons platforms. The true strength of the Skitarii legions lies not just in their individual capabilities, but in their numbers and deployment capabilities. Where a Space Marine chapter might field 1,000 battle brothers supported by vehicles and serfs, a single major forge world can deploy Skitarii forces, numbering in the hundreds of thousands or even millions. These forces march to war on foot, their augmented bodies capable of maintaining pace for months without rest, requiring no supply trains of food or water, needing only occasional maintenance and ammunition resupply. This creates a fundamentally different military force than the Adeptus Astartes. Space Marines excel at decisive strikes, overwhelming force, applied at critical points to shatter enemy formations and seize objectives. They are elite special forces, surgical instruments designed for precision work. The Skitarii legions can certainly perform similar operations when required, but they also possess the capability for sustained campaigns of attrition that would devastate even the largest Space Marine chapters. A Skitarii force can surround an enemy stronghold and simply advance through withering fire, accepting casualties that would force a Space Marine force to withdraw, knowing that the Forge worlds can replace losses far faster than most enemies can inflict them. Consider the logistics involved. When a Space Marine chapter suffers casualties, replacing those losses requires years of training new recruits, implanting gene seed harvested from fallen brothers, and bringing the new Marines up to combat effectiveness. A chapter that loses 100 battle brothers in a campaign has effectively lost 10% of its strength, a blow that will take decades to fully recover from. When a Skitarii legion loses 100 warriors, replacement troops can be manufactured and deployed within months or even weeks. The Forge worlds possess the infrastructure to rapidly produce new Skitarii through vat-growing programs, accelerated training using data injection techniques, and cybernetic augmentation processes that create combat-ready soldiers in a fraction of the time required to create a Space Marine. This disparity becomes even more pronounced when considering the Mechanicus's ability to field multiple types of forces simultaneously. A Forge world under threat can deploy not just its Skitarii legions, but also its Titan Legion, its Knight households, its battle congregation of tech priests and servitors, and various specialized units, like the Legio Cybernetica's battle robots. The Mechanicus fights not with a single type of elite soldier, but with a combined arms force that can adapt to any threat. There's also the question of equipment quality and availability. Skitarii forces wield weapons that are, in many cases, superior to what the Imperial Guard can field and competitive with Space Marine weapons. Galvanic rifles, radium carbines, plasma calivers, arc rifles, and other Mechanicus weapons represent advanced technology that the Forge worlds produce for their own forces before considering the needs of other Imperial organizations. Space Marines depend on Mechanicus forge worlds to manufacture and maintain their own weapons and equipment. Each chapter maintains close ties with at least one forge world, often pledging aid in exchange for priority in receiving new equipment and repairs. But this relationship flows one direction. The Mechanicus can function without Space Marine support, but Space Marines cannot function without Mechanicus support. The Skitarii also possess another advantage that becomes crucial in extended campaigns. They feel no fear, suffer no morale failure, and never retreat unless ordered to do so. Space Marines certainly possess legendary courage and determination, their psychological conditioning and genetic enhancements making them nearly immune to panic. But they remain thinking beings capable of tactical withdrawal when a situation becomes untenable. Skitarii, especially those who have undergone extensive mental conditioning, simply do not make such calculations. They advance when ordered to advance. They hold position when ordered to hold. They die without complaint, their mechanical worldview accepting destruction as simply another data point in the eternal equation of war. This makes them ideal for missions where victory requires accepting terrible casualties, where the objective must be taken regardless of the cost. One might argue that this makes Skitarii inferior to Space Marines, that the ability to think tactically and make independent decisions represents a crucial advantage. And in certain scenarios, that argument holds merit, but it ignores the reality that the Mechanicus deploys tech priests alongside their Skitarii forces specifically to provide that tactical oversight. The Skitarii provide the disciplined, unquestioning troops, while tech priest Domini and marshals provide the strategic thinking and battlefield adaptation. This creates a military force that combines the best aspects of both approaches. Elite commanders who can make complex tactical decisions, supported by troops who execute those decisions with perfect discipline and zero hesitation. Space Marines must be both thinkers and fighters, requiring each battle brother to possess combat skills, tactical acumen, and independent judgment. Skitarii can specialize, with the augmented soldiers focusing purely on combat effectiveness, while their tech priest commanders handle the thinking. Finally, there's the simple matter of presence. When the Imperium requires military force, it most often turns to the Imperial Guard. But when Forge worlds face threats, when the Mechanicus requires military might to pursue its own goals, it calls upon the Skitarii legions. These forces answer to Mars and the Fabricator General, not to the Adeptus Terra or the High Lords of Terra. They pursue Mechanicus objectives, protect Mechanicus assets, and enforce Mechanicus policies. The Adeptus Mechanicus maintains independent military might that it can deploy according to its own strategic interests. Space Marines, for all their autonomy, still theoretically answer to Imperial authority and serve Imperial interests. The Mechanicus has successfully maintained genuine independence for over 10,000 years, an independence backed by military force that includes not just the Titan legions and Skitarii, but also Forge world defenses, Knight households, and strategic technologies that make the Mechanicus effectively immune to Imperial coercion. Forge worlds, industrial dominion, the military forces of the Mechanicus, impressive as they are, represent only the most visible aspect of their power. To truly understand why the Adeptus Mechanicus stands as a force superior even to the Space Marines, one must look beyond armies and god engines to the industrial infrastructure that sustains them. The Forge worlds themselves. Forge worlds are planets that have been completely given over to manufacture and industry, where agri-worlds produce food and hive worlds house teeming billions of workers. Forge worlds serve a single purpose: the creation of technology, weapons, equipment, and machines for the Imperium. The surface of a typical Forge world has been utterly transformed by millennia of industrialization, all natural ecosystems destroyed, all breathable atmosphere replaced with toxic smog, all water consumed or polluted beyond recovery. In their place rise forge complexes of staggering scale, manufacturing facilities that stretch across continents, refineries that process entire mountain ranges into raw materials, foundries that consume forests of fuel to smelt metals for Imperial warships. The sky above a forge world glows with the reflected light of billions of furnaces, forges, and chemical reactions. Rivers run with toxic runoff. The very air burns human lungs after just minutes of exposure. And yet these hellish industrial wastelands represent power on a scale that dwarfs anything the Space Marines can muster. Mars, the forge world that serves as the Adeptus Mechanicus's capital and spiritual heart, epitomizes this power. Before the Age of Strife, Mars had been terraformed, its surface covered with manufactured ecosystems and breathable atmosphere. The warfare and industrialization of subsequent millennia destroyed all of that, returning Mars to its primordial desert state with one crucial addition: vast forge complexes that now cover virtually every square meter of the planet's surface. The Ring of Iron, a massive construction of dry docks and shipyards in geosynchronous orbit above the Martian equator, produces the majority of the Imperial Navy's capital ships. These shipyards contain the expertise and equipment necessary to build everything from simple system defense monitors to massive battleships and battlecruisers. The vessels that carry Space Marine chapters across the void, the ships that defend Imperial space from Xenos incursions, the carriers that transport Imperial Guard regiments between war zones, all of them trace their origins to Mechanicus shipyards, with many coming specifically from the Ring of Iron. On Mars's surface, forge temples and forge cities house repositories of knowledge that dwarf even the greatest Imperial libraries. While the organization remains chaotic and haphazard, these databanks contain scientific and technical information spanning millennia, including fragments of knowledge from the dark age of technology. Tech priests spend lifetimes searching through these records, seeking lost wisdom that might grant advantage in the eternal struggle for survival. Mars also houses the central authority of the cult Mechanicus, the Fabricator General of Mars, who serves as one of the High Lords of Terror, rules over the Mechanicus hierarchy through the Synod of Mars. This body coordinates Mechanicus activities across the galaxy, arbitrates disputes between forge worlds, and maintains the religious orthodoxy that defines the cult Mechanicus's relationship with technology. But Mars, for all its importance, represents just one forge world among hundreds. The Imperium contains forge worlds scattered across every segmentum, each one a sovereign domain answering ultimately to Mars, but possessing substantial autonomy in its own operations. Major forge worlds like Ryza specialize in plasma technology, producing some of the finest plasma weapons in the Imperium. Griffon IV, before its fall to Hive Fleet Leviathan, housed the mighty Legio Griffonicus. Agrippina, located near the Eye of Terror, served as a primary supplier of military equipment for the forces defending the Cadian Gate.
You know, I'll be honest with you. When I first got into Warhammer, I thought the Space Marines were the absolute pinnacle of Imperial power. I mean, who wouldn't? They're on every box, every poster. They're the face of the franchise. But the more I dug into the lore, the more I realized something that genuinely changed how I viewed the entire setting. The mechanics isn't just powerful, they're terrifyingly essential. And here's what really gets me. The Mechanicus doesn't even need to fire a shot to win. They just wait. They outlast everyone. Space Marines are incredible warriors, don't get me wrong. But they're playing a game where the Mechanicus literally owns the board. It's like being the best chess player in the world, but your opponent owns the factory that makes the pieces. That realization hits me hard. And it's why I wanted to make this video, because I think a lot of people miss just how deep that power imbalance really goes. Anyway, back to the story.
Before the Great Rift tore the galaxy asunder, Metallica maintains vast Titan legions and produces some of the most advanced war machines available to Imperial forces. Each major forge world commands the resources and manufacturing capability to equip entire Crusade forces. When the Imperium launches a massive military campaign, it calls upon forge worlds to provide the weapons, ammunition, armor, vehicles, and equipment that make such campaigns possible. The Macarian Crusade, one of the most successful Imperial campaigns in recent millennia, succeeded in large part because forge worlds like Mars, Graia, and Griffon IV committed substantial resources and forces to support Lord Commander Solar Macarius's ambitions. Consider what a major forge world can produce in a standard year. Millions of lasguns, hundreds of thousands of suits of flak armor, tens of thousands of vehicles, ranging from Chimera APCs to Lehman Russ battle tanks, dozens of Titans and super heavy vehicles, plus ammunition, spare parts, medical supplies, and countless other items necessary to sustain Imperial military operations. Now consider that the Imperium contains hundreds of forge worlds, each producing equipment at similar scales. The total manufacturing output of the Mechanicus exceeds the production capabilities of all other Imperial institutions combined. The forge worlds don't just supply one army or one fleet, they supply all of them, simultaneously, continuously, for millennia. This creates a form of power that Space Marines simply cannot match. A Space Marine chapter, even one with access to significant manufacturing facilities within its fortress monastery, produces equipment primarily for its own use. They maintain weapons workshops where artificers craft specialized equipment, apothecarians where gene seed is cultivated and monitored, and armories where vehicles are maintained and repaired. But a Space Marine chapter cannot produce its own power armor suits from raw materials. They cannot manufacture the sophisticated electronics required for their targeting systems. They cannot create the specialized ammunition their weapons require, the fuel for their vehicles, or the replacement parts for their ships. All of these items must be requisitioned from Mechanicus forge worlds or obtained through trade agreements with the tech priests. This dependency flows through every aspect of Space Marine operations. Their bolters require ammunition manufactured to exacting specifications. Their power armor needs regular maintenance by tech priests, trained in the proper rituals and procedures. Their vehicles depend on fuel refined in Mechanicus facilities. Their ships require parts and maintenance that only Forge World shipyards can properly provide. The Mechanicus, by contrast, requires nothing from the Space Marines that it cannot obtain elsewhere or produce itself. When Forge Worlds face military threats, they can call upon their own Skitarii legions and Titan legions for defense. When they require additional force, they can request aid from knight households bound to them through ancient feudal obligations. And if even that proves insufficient, they can manufacture additional military forces from their vast industrial capabilities. The relationship between Space Marine chapters and Forge Worlds often appears cooperative and mutually beneficial. Chapters pledge military support to their patron, Forge Worlds, in exchange for priority in equipment production and maintenance. Tech priests serve aboard Space Marine vessels and within their fortress monasteries, maintaining equipment and providing technical expertise. But beneath this cooperation lies a fundamental imbalance of power. The Forge World could, if necessary, find other sources of military protection. The Space Marine chapter has no alternative source for the equipment and technical support it requires to function. This becomes particularly evident during the founding of new Space Marine chapters. The gene seed for new chapters comes from stores maintained by the Mechanicus on Mars, tithed from existing chapters at regular intervals. When the High Lords of Terror declare a new founding, it is Mechanicus facilities that culture the necessary gene seed. Mechanicus tech priests, who perform the delicate work of creating new Space Marines, and Mechanicus Forge Worlds that provide the equipment, weapons, and armor for these new chapters. Without Mechanicus support, no new Space Marine chapters could be founded. Without Mechanicus manufacturing, existing chapters would slowly deteriorate as equipment wore out and could not be replaced. Without Mechanicus ships, Space Marines could not travel between stars. Without Mechanicus weapons, they would have no bolters to wield, no power swords to carry, no tanks to deploy. The Mechanicus, meanwhile, would continue manufacturing equipment for the Imperial Guard, producing Titans for its legions, maintaining the ships of the Imperial Navy, and generally functioning as it has for 10 millennia. The loss of Space Marine support would inconvenience certain Forge Worlds that have come to rely on Astartes' protection, but it would not fundamentally alter the Mechanicus' position within the Imperium. Forge Worlds also possess defensive capabilities that make them extraordinarily difficult to conquer or destroy. Their surfaces bristle with defense batteries, void shield generators, and anti-orbital weapons. Their cities contain billions of menial workers who can be pressed into militia service if necessary. Their Skitarii legions train constantly in the defense of their home worlds. And of course, they house the Titan legions, god engines that can engage fleet assets attempting orbital bombardment and annihilate any ground forces foolish enough to attempt an assault. Several Imperial organizations have learned the hard way that threatening a Forge world brings consequences. During the Moirai Schism in early M35, when the Forge world Moirai seceded during the Nova Terra interregnum, the conflict that followed devastated entire sectors and drew Titan legions and even Space Marine chapters into the turmoil. It took over 2 millennia of desperate warfare before the Moirit doctrines were considered fully purged. The message was clear. The Adeptus Mechanicus will not tolerate threats to its sovereignty, and it possesses the military might to back up that position. Technological supremacy and the monopoly of knowledge. Military force and industrial capacity represent tangible, measurable forms of power, but the Adeptus Mechanicus wields another form of strength that proves even more fundamental. They hold a complete monopoly on technological knowledge within the Imperium. Every advanced weapon, every piece of sophisticated equipment, every complex machine that enables Imperial civilization to function exists because the Mechanicus permits it to exist. This monopoly extends far beyond simple manufacturing capability. The tech priests of the Mechanicus understand how technology functions in ways that other Imperial institutions do not. They possess the knowledge to repair and maintain equipment that, to others, appears almost magical in its complexity. They guard this knowledge jealously, sharing it only with those who have been initiated into the cult Mechanicus and sworn oaths of loyalty to Mars. Space Marines rely on this knowledge in ways both obvious and subtle. A chapter's Tech Marines, those battle brothers who receive training from the Mechanicus in the maintenance and operation of complex equipment, serve as the primary link between their chapter and the cult Mechanicus. These Marines travel to Mars or major Forge worlds, where they undergo years of training in the proper rituals and procedures for maintaining Space Marine equipment. But even Tech Marines do not receive the full knowledge that Mechanicus tech priests possess. They learn specific procedures for maintaining specific types of equipment, always framed within the context of ritual and religious observance, rather than pure technical understanding. A Tech Marine might learn how to replace the power plant in a Land Raider, but he would not learn the fundamental principles that make that power plant function. He could follow the proper procedures for consecrating and installing a new plasma coil, but he could not design or improve that coil. This creates a permanent dependency relationship. Space Marines must regularly send their Tech Marines back to Forge worlds for additional training and to learn the proper procedures for maintaining new equipment. They must establish and maintain good relationships with Forge worlds to ensure they continue receiving the technical support their chapter requires. They must accept that ultimate authority over their equipment resides not with their chapter masters but with the Mechanicus tech priests who designed and built that equipment in the first place. The Mechanicus carefully maintains this monopoly through several mechanisms. First, they hoard knowledge within their own ranks, restricting access to information based on rank and specialization within the Mechanicus hierarchy. A junior tech priest might know how to maintain specific machines, but not understand the underlying principles that make them function. As tech priests advance in rank and prove their loyalty, they gain access to progressively more advanced knowledge, with the greatest secrets reserved for magi and higher-ranking members of the priesthood. Second, they frame all technical knowledge in religious terms. The Omnissiah's wisdom guides proper procedure. The machine spirit must be appeased through correct ritual. Deviation from approved methods represents tech heresy, a sin against the machine god that can result in expulsion from the Mechanicus or even execution. This religious framework makes it psychologically and culturally difficult for Mechanicus adepts to share knowledge with outsiders, even when practical considerations might suggest such sharing would prove beneficial. Third, they ruthlessly suppress attempts by others to develop independent technical expertise. When other Imperial institutions try to establish their own manufacturing capabilities or develop their own understanding of technology, the Mechanicus often intervenes, claiming that such efforts violate the Mechanicus's monopoly rights granted under the Treaty of Mars. The Mechanicus has been known to use economic pressure, withholding of supplies, or even military force to shut down facilities that attempt to operate outside Mechanicus oversight. The gene seed monitoring system provides an excellent example of how this monopoly operates in practice. Every Space Marine chapter must tithe 5% of its gene seed to the Mechanicus at regular intervals. Officially, this serves two purposes: monitoring the genetic purity of each chapter's gene seed and maintaining stores that can be used for founding new chapters. The monitoring function requires Mechanicus expertise, because only Mechanicus facilities possess the equipment and knowledge necessary to properly analyze gene seed for mutations and corruption. Apothecaries within Space Marine chapters can harvest gene seed and maintain it in proper storage, but they lack the sophisticated biological expertise required to detect subtle genetic drift or identify the early stages of mutation. This means the Mechanicus knows, in detail, the genetic status of every Space Marine chapter in the Imperium. They know which chapters possess stable gene seed and which suffer from mutations. They know which chapters might be approaching genetic collapse and which could serve as sources for new gene seed lineages. This information provides the Mechanicus with tremendous influence over Space Marine affairs, as they can use this knowledge to support favored chapters while subtly undermining those they find problematic. The Mechanicus also controls the standard template construct databases, those precious repositories of Dark Age technology that contain blueprints and manufacturing specifications for equipment that the Imperium can no longer produce through any other means. Complete STCs have become almost impossibly rare, with most existing examples taking the form of fragments containing instructions for specific items. The Mechanicus quests endlessly for new STC fragments, sending explorator fleets into dangerous regions of space, and sometimes deploying military force to claim STC discoveries before others can access them. Every piece of equipment the Imperium uses that surpasses medieval technology levels derives from STC templates or knowledge preserved by the Mechanicus. The humble lasgun comes from an STC fragment. Power armor designs trace back to Dark Age templates. Titan construction depends on partial STC data, combined with knowledge accumulated over millennia of manufacturing experience. Without access to these templates, the Imperium would slowly regress to lower technology levels as equipment wore out and could not be replaced. The Mechanicus knows this, and they use this knowledge as both shield and weapon in their dealings with other Imperial institutions. Consider what would happen if a Space Marine chapter somehow managed to greatly offend the Mechanicus. The Forge Worlds would not need to attack the chapter directly, or even openly refuse to provide support. They would simply delay shipments of ammunition, cite supply chain problems when replacement parts were requested, discover that the scheduled maintenance slot for the chapter's strike cruiser needed to be pushed back due to higher priority work, and generally make the chapter's existence increasingly difficult through pure bureaucratic obstruction. Over time, the chapter would deteriorate, weapons would malfunction more frequently, vehicles would remain out of service, waiting for parts that never seemed to arrive. Ship systems would develop problems that no one seemed quite able to fix. Eventually, the chapter would find itself unable to fulfill its obligations, its combat effectiveness compromised not through any direct action, but simply through the withdrawal of Mechanicus support. Has this ever actually happened? The Mechanicus does not advertise such actions, and chapters affected would have strong incentives to conceal their difficulties. But the threat exists, implicit in every interaction between Space Marines and Tech Priests, a reminder that the relationship between these institutions flows in only one direction. The Mechanicus wields this power carefully, understanding that too blatant an exercise of their monopoly might provoke dangerous responses. But they also ensure that everyone understands the reality of the situation. The Mechanicus permits the Imperium to function at its current technology level, and that permission could theoretically be withdrawn. This technological monopoly extends even to seemingly simple maintenance tasks. A Space Marine might be able to field strip his bolter and clean it, but if complex internal components fail, only a Tech Marine or Mechanicus Tech Priest can properly repair them. A chapter's serfs might handle basic vehicle maintenance, but major repairs require Mechanicus-trained personnel. Even something as fundamental as producing new bolter ammunition requires access to Mechanicus manufacturing facilities and technical knowledge that chapters do not possess independently. The Mechanicus has also ensured that many of the Imperium's most advanced technologies require continuing Mechanicus involvement. The Astronomicon, that great psychic beacon that makes warp travel possible, operates from Terra but requires Mechanicus-maintained equipment and regular technical support. The Golden Throne, which sustains the Emperor's decaying physical form, depends on Mechanicus tech priests who perform constant maintenance and desperate repairs, trying to keep functioning equipment whose operating principles they no longer fully understand. If the Mechanicus were to simply withdraw all support from the wider Imperium, the results would be catastrophic. Warp travel would become impossible within years as the Astronomicon failed. The Emperor would die as the Golden Throne ceased functioning. Imperial military forces would run out of ammunition, their weapons would break down irreparably, and their vehicles would become useless metal sculptures within decades at most. The Space Marines would last longer than most Imperial forces, their small numbers and high-quality equipment providing some buffer against the collapse. But even they would eventually succumb, their gene seed failing without Mechanicus monitoring, their equipment breaking down without Mechanicus maintenance, their numbers dwindling without Mechanicus support for recruitment and training. None of this should be interpreted as suggesting the Mechanicus desires the Imperium's collapse or would actually withdraw support. The Mechanicus has its own reasons for maintaining the Imperium, including the protection it provides for Forge worlds and the resources the Imperium's vast domain makes available. But the ability to do something often matters as much as the intention to do it. The Mechanicus could, theoretically, cause the Imperium's collapse through simple withdrawal of support. No other Imperial institution can make that claim. The Knight houses under Mechanicus control. When discussing the military might of the Adeptus Mechanicus, one cannot overlook the Knight households that owe allegiance to Mars and the Forge worlds. These ancient warrior traditions pilot Knight-class war machines, smaller than Titans but still formidable battlefield assets. And approximately half of all Knight households in the Imperium have sworn their primary loyalty not to the Imperium or the Adeptus Terra, but to the Mechanicus itself. During the Dark Age of technology, human explorers spread across the galaxy, establishing colonies on distant worlds. Many of these colonists brought with them Knight suits, sophisticated walking war machines, originally designed for industrial purposes, but easily adapted for defense and warfare. When the Age of Strife shattered human civilization, these colonies found themselves isolated and forced to develop their own societies and traditions. Knight worlds emerged from this isolation. Feudal societies, where those who piloted knights formed an aristocratic warrior elite. These knight pilots, bonded to their machines through neural interfaces, passed their knights and titles down through noble lineages, creating dynasties that lasted for millennia. When the Great Crusade reconnected these knight worlds with the wider Imperium, many swore allegiance directly to the Emperor and became part of the Imperium's military structure. But others had maintained contact with Mechanicus explorator fleets throughout the Age of Strife, receiving technical support and maintaining their knight suits in exchange for protection and service. These knight worlds became Questor Mechanicus houses, bound to Forge worlds through oaths of fealty and mutual obligation. This arrangement has persisted for 10,000 years. Questor Mechanicus houses provide military support for the Forge worlds they serve, defending them against attack and contributing knights to Mechanicus military operations. In exchange, Mechanicus tech priests maintain and repair the house's knights, ensure they have access to ammunition and supplies, and provide new knights when old ones are destroyed or retired. A knight suit, while smaller than even a scout titan, represents a significant military asset. Armed with weapons like thermal cannons, rapid-fire battle cannons, and Reaper chainswords, a single knight can destroy tanks, annihilate infantry formations, and serve as a mobile firebase for Imperial forces. In close combat, a knight wields its immense strength and size to crush opponents, its armor shrugging off fire that would destroy lesser vehicles. Knights operate faster and more flexibly than titans, able to move quickly across varied terrain and respond rapidly to changing battlefield conditions. A formation of knights can deploy ahead of slower titan forces, securing flanks and scouting enemy positions. Or they can serve as mobile reserves, held back until needed, then committed to exploit breakthroughs or shore up threatened sectors. When deployed in groups called lances, knights become devastatingly effective. A typical lance consists of 3 to 6 knights, often including a mix of knight types specialized for different combat roles. Quest or Mechanicus houses can field dozens or even hundreds of knights, representing military power that rivals a Space Marine chapter in raw, destructive capability, if not tactical flexibility. The Mechanicus deploys Quest or Mechanicus forces as part of larger military operations, using them to supplement Titan legions and Skitarii forces. A typical Mechanicus assault might include Skitarii cohorts advancing under the covering fire of a Knight Lance, with Titans providing strategic firepower and command coordination. This combined arms approach allows the Mechanicus to respond to a wide variety of threats with appropriate force. Space Marine chapters maintain no equivalent force multiplier. They cannot call upon hundreds of Knight suits to reinforce their assaults. They do not command Titan legions to provide strategic firepower. Their military strength derives entirely from their own battle brothers and the equipment they can deploy through their own resources. Quest or Mechanicus houses also provide the Forge Worlds with politically valuable assets. Knights and their pilots carry prestige and social authority that Skitarii and tech priests often lack. When the Mechanicus wishes to project power or demonstrate commitment to an operation, deploying knights sends a powerful message about the importance the Mechanicus places on the endeavor. The relationship between Quest or Mechanicus houses and Forge Worlds operates on feudal principles. But this feudalism includes practical dependencies that ensure loyalty. Knight suits require sophisticated maintenance that only Mechanicus tech priests can provide. The Throne Mechanicum, the neural interface that bonds pilot to knight, uses technology that the knight houses do not fully understand and cannot replicate. Weapons, ammunition, fuel, and replacement parts all must come from Mechanicus facilities. This creates a patron-client relationship heavily weighted in the Mechanicus's favor. The knight houses need Forge World support to maintain their knights and their position. The Forge Worlds, while certainly benefiting from knight support, could, if necessary, rely on Skitarii and Titan legions for military force. The knights add capability and flexibility, but they do not represent a critical dependency. Some knight houses have tried to reduce their reliance on Forge World support, developing their own maintenance traditions and hoarding spare parts. But ultimately, the Mechanicus controls the knowledge and manufacturing capacity required to maintain knights over the long term. A house that alienates its patron Forge World will find its knights gradually deteriorating. Unable to obtain the sophisticated components and technical expertise required to keep them operational, the Mechanicus also uses its relationship with Quest or Mechanicus houses to extend its influence into regions where direct Mechanicus presence remains limited. A Knight World owing allegiance to a Forge World effectively becomes part of that Forge World's domain, providing resources, intelligence, and military support. This creates networks of allied worlds surrounding major Forge Worlds, giving the Mechanicus political and military reach far beyond the Forge Worlds themselves. When combined with Titan legions, Skitarii forces, and Forge World industrial capacity, the Quest or Mechanicus houses represent one more element in the Mechanicus's vast military arsenal. Space Marines possess no equivalent network of sworn supporters, no feudal vassals bound by ancient oaths and practical dependency to provide military support. Manufacturing might, the lifeblood of the Imperium. At this point in our examination, a pattern has emerged. Whether discussing Titan legions, Skitarii forces, knight households, technological monopolies, or Forge World industrial capacity, every comparison between the Adeptus Mechanicus and Space Marines returns to a central truth. The Mechanicus controls the means of production, and this control grants them power that transcends simple military might. Manufacturing capability determines what forces can be sustained, what equipment they can wield, and how losses can be replaced. The Adeptus Mechanicus possesses manufacturing capability that dwarfs every other imperial institution combined. This is not hyperbole or exaggeration. It is the documented reality of how the Imperium functions. When the Imperial Guard requires Lascans for new regiments, they requisition them from Mechanicus Forge worlds. When the Imperial Navy needs new vessels to replace losses, Mechanicus shipyards build them. When Space Marine chapters require new power armor, suits, ammunition, or vehicles, Mechanicus facilities manufacture them. Every military organization in the Imperium, from the smallest Imperial Guard regiment to the largest Crusade fleet, depends on Mechanicus production. Consider the scale required to sustain the Imperium's military forces. The Imperial Guard alone consists of billions or possibly trillions of soldiers spread across the galaxy, organized into countless regiments fighting on thousands of war zones simultaneously. Each soldier requires a lasgun, flak armor, standard equipment, plus regular resupply of power cells for their weapons. Each regiment requires vehicles, heavy weapons, medical supplies, communications equipment, and countless other items. The Forge Worlds produce all of this. Every single lasgun comes from a Forge World production line. Every Chimera APC, every Leman Russ battle tank, every Basilisk artillery piece, all manufactured in Forge World facilities, according to STC templates and Mechanicus procedures. Now add the Imperial Navy's requirements. Each ship requires regular maintenance, ammunition for its weapons, fuel for its engines, and replacement parts for systems that fail or suffer battle damage. Larger vessels require crew numbering in the tens of thousands, all of whom need equipment and supplies. Construction of new vessels requires resources on a scale that staggers the imagination. Millions of tons of metal for hulls and armor, sophisticated electronics and targeting systems, plasma reactors for power generation, warp drives to enable faster-than-light travel. The Mechanicus shipyards, particularly the Ring of Iron above Mars, handle all of this. They possess the facilities to build vessels ranging from small system defense monitors to massive battleships. They maintain the expertise required to install and calibrate the complex systems these ships require. They produce the ammunition that feeds the ship's weapons batteries. Then there are the Adeptus Sororitas, requiring their own weapons and power armor. The Adeptus Arbites, needing equipment for enforcing Imperial law. The Inquisition, requesting specialized equipment for investigating threats to the Imperium. Every single Imperial institution requires equipment and supplies, and virtually all of that equipment ultimately comes from Mechanicus facilities. Against this backdrop, Space Marine requirements appear almost trivial. A chapter at full-strength fields, 1,000 battle brothers. Their equipment needs, while sophisticated and expensive, pale compared to equipping billions of Imperial Guard soldiers or maintaining hundreds of Imperial Navy vessels. A Forge world that commits its production capabilities to supporting a Space Marine chapter could easily fulfill all that chapter's needs, while simultaneously maintaining its obligations to supply other Imperial forces. This becomes crucial when considering comparative power. The Space Marines cannot make the Mechanicus do anything through military force, because the Mechanicus controls the equipment that makes Space Marines effective. A chapter that tried to coerce a Forge world through threats would quickly find itself cut off from resupply and maintenance support. Even if the chapter successfully conquered a Forge world through military force, operating the facilities would require Mechanicus expertise that the chapter does not possess. The Mechanicus, conversely, does not depend on Space Marine support in any fundamental way. Forge worlds can call upon Skitarii legions, Titan legions, and Knight households for military protection. They can manufacture additional forces if needed. They control the technologies that make Imperial military forces effective. A Forge world facing a threat from a Space Marine chapter could theoretically appeal to other chapters for support, offering preferential treatment and equipment access in exchange for protection against the rogue chapter. History provides examples of this dynamic playing out. During the Moirae Schism, Space Marine chapters found themselves drawn into a conflict between Mechanicus factions, fighting each other at the behest of their Forge world patrons. The chapters were not independent actors pursuing their own interests, but rather tools used by Mechanicus powers in their struggle for dominance within the cult Mechanicus. The Mechanicus also controls access to advanced technologies that Space Marines cannot replicate. Terminator armor, Those precious suits that transform Space Marines into nearly unstoppable close-quarters combat specialists exist in limited numbers. Chapters cannot manufacture new suits, but must instead rely on what they can recover from other chapters or obtain from Forge World vaults. The Mechanicus could, if it chose to do so, provide generous access to Terminator armor for favored chapters while withholding it from others. Advanced vehicles like Land Raiders, Land Raider Crusaders, and Land Raider Redeemers come exclusively from Forge World production lines. Chapters maintain and repair these vehicles but cannot build new ones from scratch. If losses in combat exceed what the chapter can recover or receive from Forge World suppliers, the chapter's heavy armor capabilities gradually diminish. Even bolter ammunition, the standard weapon for all Space Marines, requires Mechanicus manufacturing capabilities. The sophisticated mass-reactive ammunition that gives bolters their devastating effectiveness cannot be produced with simple munitions equipment. Each round contains a rocket propellant system, gyroscopic stabilization, and an explosive warhead timed to detonate after penetrating the target. Manufacturing these rounds requires precision equipment and quality control that only Mechanicus facilities can provide. This extends to every aspect of Space Marine operations. Power armor requires sophisticated servos, artificial muscle fibers, auto-reactive shoulder plates, rebreather systems, recycling units, and countless other components. A chapter's artificers can maintain and repair this equipment, but they cannot manufacture the sophisticated components from raw materials. Those components must come from Forge Worlds. Jump packs allow assault marines to deploy via vertical envelopment, appearing suddenly above enemy positions and striking before defenders can react. These devices require fuel manufactured to precise specifications, sophisticated control systems, and regular maintenance by trained tech marines. Chapters depend on Forge World suppliers for replacement parts and fuel. Dreadnoughts, those venerated war machines that house the shattered bodies of mortally wounded Space Marines, represent some of the most sophisticated equipment chapters possess. Their sarcophagi maintain life support systems that can sustain catastrophically injured warriors for centuries or even millennia. Their weapons systems allow fallen heroes to continue fighting long after their bodies should have died. But chapters cannot build new dreadnoughts, they can only maintain the ancient examples they already possess. New dreadnoughts, when they become available, come from Forge World vaults, where they have been stored since the Horus Heresy or even the Great Crusade. Every specialized weapon, every piece of advanced equipment, every vehicle and aircraft a chapter employs comes from Mechanicus facilities. The chapters maintain workshops where their artificers craft specialized items, modify standard equipment to meet specific needs, and perform regular maintenance on all their gear. But this represents modification and maintenance of Mechanicus-produced equipment, not independent manufacturing capability. The Mechanicus could continue functioning perfectly well without Space Marine support. They would lose some military capability and would need to rely more heavily on Skitarii and Titan forces, but their fundamental operations would continue unchanged. They would still manufacture equipment for the Imperial Guard and Navy. They would still maintain Forge World facilities and pursue their quest for knowledge. They would still control the technologies that make Imperial civilization possible. Space Marines, without Mechanicus support, would cease to function as an effective military force within years. Their equipment would deteriorate, their losses could not be replaced, and their ability to fulfill their role as the Imperium's elite military force would gradually disappear. Weapons that reshape reality. Beyond standard military equipment, the Adeptus Mechanicus maintains access to weapons and technologies that exist on the border between science and sorcery. These esoteric instruments of destruction rarely see deployment, held back for only the most critical situations, but their mere existence demonstrates the vast gulf between Mechanicus capabilities and those of any other Imperial institution. The Ordinatus engines represent the most extreme examples of Mechanicus superweapons. These massive war machines, each unique in design and purpose, carry weapons capable of destroying continents, collapsing hive cities, or annihilating fleet assets from planetary surfaces. The Ordinatus engines bear names like Mars, Armageddon, and Ulanor, commemorating the worlds where they were first deployed or the victories they achieved. One Ordinatus pattern mounts a weapon that fires a concentrated sonic pulse capable of leveling entire city districts with each shot. Another fires projectiles that burrow deep underground before detonating, triggering earthquakes and volcanic eruptions. A third generates gravitic anomalies that tear apart void-shielded bunkers and starship hulls with equal ease. The Mechanicus deploys these weapons sparingly, understanding that such destructive power comes with costs. The Ordinatus engines require tremendous resources to build and maintain. They move slowly, making them vulnerable to enemy countermeasures, if not properly protected. And their weapons often cause collateral damage so extensive that using them represents a last resort when all other options have failed. But the ability to deploy such weapons, even rarely, grants the Mechanicus strategic capabilities that Space Marines cannot match. A Space Marine chapter, regardless of its size or equipment, cannot destroy a continent. It cannot trigger volcanic eruptions from orbit. It cannot level entire hive cities with single shots. The Mechanicus also maintains control over vortex weapons, those terrifying devices that tear holes in reality itself. Vortex grenades, vortex missiles, and larger vortex warheads create temporary breaches into the warp, creating anomalies that consume everything near them before collapsing. These weapons see limited use due to their unpredictable nature. The vortices sometimes expand beyond safe parameters, or persist longer than intended, or move in unexpected directions. Yet they remain available for use in desperate situations. A vortex weapon can destroy hardened bunkers, eliminate powerful enemy assets, or create barriers that enemy forces cannot cross. The Mechanicus manufactures these devices and controls their distribution, providing them to favored forces while withholding them from others. Conversion beamers represent another example of Mechanicus technological supremacy. These weapons fire beams of energy that convert matter directly into energy, destroying targets at the atomic level. The beams grow more powerful with distance, making conversion beamers ideal for long-range fire support. Tech priests sometimes carry portable conversion beamers into battle, though the weapon's bulk and power requirements limit who can effectively wield them. The Mechanicus also researches and deploys exotic technologies recovered from alien civilizations or discovered in Dark Age caches, rad weapons that deliver lethal doses of radiation in concentrated beams, arc weapons that channel electricity with such intensity that they can overload force fields and cook targets in their armor, phosphor weapons that coat targets in burning chemicals that continue burning even underwater or in vacuum. While some of these weapons see limited deployment with Imperial Guard or Space Marine forces, the Mechanicus maintains primary control over their manufacture and distribution. They possess the most advanced variants, the most sophisticated applications, and the deepest understanding of how these technologies function. The Mechanicus has also demonstrated willingness to deploy ancient technologies that the wider Imperium considers too dangerous for general use. Artificial intelligence, abhorred as abominable intelligence throughout the Imperium, still exists in limited forms within Mechanicus facilities. The Castellan robots, massive war machines operated through carefully programmed protocols, represent a careful balance, sophisticated enough to be tactically useful, restricted enough to avoid constituting true AI. But persistent rumors suggest that some Mechanicus factions have pushed beyond these restrictions, developing or recovering true artificial intelligences for research purposes or even battlefield deployment. The Mechanicus officially denies these claims, citing their adherence to orthodox doctrine against abominable intelligence. But the suspicions persist, fueled by occasional encounters with war machines that display capabilities beyond what simple programming should allow. Then there are the Dark Age technologies that the Mechanicus has recovered but chooses not to deploy. In Mechanicus vaults across the galaxy rest weapons and devices that could reshape warfare, equipment that makes modern Imperial technology look primitive by comparison. The Mechanicus maintains these artifacts, studies them carefully, and occasionally deploys selected items when situations become desperate enough. But mostly, they hoard this knowledge. They understand that releasing too many of these technologies could destabilize the careful balance of power that preserves their position. They recognize that some discoveries might prove more dangerous than useful. Weapons so devastating that their deployment could threaten the Imperium itself. This selective revelation of technology demonstrates another form of Mechanicus power. They control not just what technologies currently exist, but also what technologies could exist if they chose to deploy them. They hold back innovations and discoveries, metering out new capabilities according to their own strategic calculations, rather than making everything available immediately. Space Marines possess no equivalent capability. A chapter's armory contains weapons and equipment manufactured by others, technologies developed by Forge Worlds, and provided according to Mechanicus decisions about what should be made available. Chapters can choose which weapons to deploy in specific situations, but they cannot choose to develop entirely new weapon systems or deploy technologies that the Mechanicus has chosen to restrict. The dependency. Why? Marines cannot function without them. All of the foregoing analysis has circled around a central reality that must now be stated explicitly. Space Marines exist in a state of complete dependence upon the Adeptus Mechanicus for every aspect of their operations. This dependency is not incidental or accidental. It is structural, built into the very nature of how Space Marine chapters function and how the Imperium operates. Consider the gene seed, the fundamental biological material that transforms normal humans into Space Marines. Every chapter must tithe 5% of its gene seed stocks to the Mechanicus at regular intervals. This gene seed goes to Mars, where tech priests examine it for genetic purity, check for mutations, and maintain stores that can be used for founding new chapters. The Mechanicus thus possesses detailed knowledge of every chapter's genetic status. They know which chapters suffer from gene seed flaws, which face potential genetic collapse, which possess unusually stable gene seed, suitable for creating successor chapters. This information provides leverage over chapter affairs, as the Mechanicus can use their genetic knowledge to support or undermine individual chapters. More fundamentally, the Mechanicus controls the ability to create new Space Marines. When a chapter suffers heavy casualties and needs to rapidly replenish its ranks, the accelerated gene seed cultivation techniques required come from Mechanicus expertise. When the High Lords of Terror declare a new founding, the Mechanicus must culture the gene seed, provide the biological expertise for creating new Space Marines, and supply all the equipment and technology required to transform recruits into battle brothers. Without Mechanicus support, chapters could not expand beyond their current numbers. Gene seed harvested from fallen brothers could be implanted into new recruits, but the process requires sophisticated medical knowledge and equipment that ultimately derives from Mechanicus sources. A chapter cut off from Mechanicus support would find its ability to create new Space Marines gradually degrading as equipment failed and expertise was lost. Power armor provides another example of this dependency. Each suit of Space Marine power armor represents a masterwork of technology, incorporating systems and components that require Mechanicus manufacturing capabilities to produce. The artificial muscle bundles that grant Space Marines enhanced strength come from Mechanicus bioforges. The ceramite plates that protect them from weapons fire require specialized manufacturing processes that only Forge Worlds maintain. The auto-reactive shoulders, the backpack-mounted power sources, the helmet optics, the environmental systems, every component requires Mechanicus expertise. Chapters maintain workshops where artificers perform repairs and modifications, but they cannot manufacture new power armor suits from raw materials. They can replace damaged components with spares requisitioned from Forge Worlds, but they cannot produce those components themselves. Over time, every chapter's armory slowly accumulates damage that cannot be fully repaired without Mechanicus support. This becomes particularly acute with older marks of power armor. Many chapters' treasure suits dating back to the Great Crusade or the Horus Heresy, ancient armor imbued with history and spiritual significance. But these ancient suits require increasingly specialized knowledge to maintain. Components fail that cannot be replaced with modern equivalents. Systems degrade in ways that require deep understanding of archaic manufacturing standards to properly repair. Only the Mechanicus possesses this knowledge. Only Mechanicus tech priests can properly maintain ancient power armor. Chapters that offend the Mechanicus might find their requests for repairs of ancient armor delayed or denied, forcing them to choose between losing their heritage or accepting whatever political compromises the Mechanicus demands. The same pattern repeats across every aspect of Space Marine operations. Bolters require specialized ammunition that only Mechanicus facilities produce. Chainswords need replacement teeth manufactured to exact specifications. Power swords require power cells and field generators that chapters cannot make themselves. Land raiders, predators, razorbacks, and every other vehicle in a chapter's motor pool requires regular maintenance and occasional replacement parts that must come from Forge World suppliers. Even a chapter's fortress monastery, that massive structure housing the chapter's warriors and facilities, requires Mechanicus expertise to maintain. The sophisticated systems that recycle air and water, generate power, and maintain environmental controls all derive from Mechanicus technologies. The armories, apothecarians, librarius chambers, and other specialized facilities require equipment that only the Mechanicus can properly maintain and repair. A chapter's fleet represents perhaps the most critical dependency. Space Marines travel between star systems aboard strike cruisers and battle barges, massive warships that combine transport capacity with formidable firepower. These vessels require constant maintenance by tech priests trained specifically in naval operations. Their warp drives, Geller fields, void shields, and weapon systems all depend on technologies that chapters do not fully understand. When a chapter's strike cruiser suffers damage in battle, only Mechanicus shipyards can perform the complex repairs required. When systems fail through age or malfunction, only Mechanicus tech priests possess the knowledge to diagnose problems and implement solutions. A chapter without access to Mechanicus naval support would find its ships gradually becoming unreliable, eventually failing entirely, as critical systems deteriorated beyond the ability of the chapter's own tech marines to maintain them. This dependency extends even to recruitment. Space Marine chapters recruit from specific worlds, drawing aspirants from populations that display the physical and mental characteristics required for transformation into Astartes. But the screening equipment used to identify suitable candidates comes from Mechanicus sources. The surgical equipment used to implant gene seed organs derives from Mechanicus designs. The medical monitoring systems that track aspirant transformation and alert apothecaries to complications require Mechanicus manufacturing and maintenance. A chapter could theoretically continue recruiting without Mechanicus support, using cruder methods and accepting higher failure rates. But the efficiency and success rates would plummet, making it increasingly difficult to maintain the chapter's strength against the constant attrition of warfare. The Mechanicus could, if they chose to do so, effectively destroy any Space Marine chapter simply by withdrawing all support. They would not need to attack the chapter directly or even openly refuse to provide aid. Simple bureaucratic delays would suffice. Maintenance slots for ships continually rescheduled, ammunition shipments delayed in transit, requests for replacement parts lost in administrative processing, tech marine training programs suddenly full with no openings available. Over years or decades, the targeted chapter would deteriorate, equipment would fail more frequently and remain out of service longer. Combat effectiveness would decline as battle brothers lacked the weapons and armor they needed. The chapter would become less able to fulfill its obligations, damaging its reputation and making other Imperial institutions less willing to request its support. Eventually, the chapter might face the choice between accepting whatever terms the Mechanicus demanded or continuing its decline toward eventual obsolescence. And throughout this process, the Mechanicus could maintain complete deniability, citing supply chain issues, resource constraints, and competing priorities, rather than admitting any deliberate campaign against the chapter. Has this happened? Almost certainly, though the Mechanicus does not advertise such actions, and affected chapters have strong incentives to conceal their difficulties. But the capability exists, and all parties involved understand that it exists. This understanding shapes every interaction between Space Marines and the Mechanicus, a constant reminder of where true power resides. Notable conflicts and demonstrations of power Throughout the Imperium's long history, the Adeptus Mechanicus has repeatedly demonstrated its military and political power through direct action. These conflicts provide concrete examples of how Mechanicus' strength compares to Space Marine capabilities, and they illustrate the consequences of underestimating the forces that Mars commands. The Schism of Mars, during the Horus Heresy, stands as perhaps the most dramatic example. When Warmaster Horus turned traitor and led half the Space Marine legions into rebellion against the Emperor, Mars became a key battleground. The Mechanicum split between those loyal to the Emperor and those who followed Horus, and the civil war that erupted on the Red Planet devastated the Forge world. Loyalist and traitor forces fought for control of Forge complexes, data repositories, and manufacturing facilities. Titan legions battled across the Martian surface, their weapons scarring the planet's already tortured landscape. Skitarii cohorts fought each other with the same disciplined efficiency they had previously used against Xenos threats. The conflict raged for years, consuming resources and lives at an apocalyptic rate. When the heresy finally ended and Horus fell at the Battle of Terra, Mars had suffered tremendous damage, but it had not broken. The Loyalist Mechanicum, now officially reorganized as the Adeptus Mechanicus, maintained control over the Red Planet and began the long process of rebuilding. More importantly, they had demonstrated that even civil war could not destroy the Mechanicus's fundamental infrastructure and capabilities. The War of the Beast in M32 provided another demonstration of Mechanicus' political power. Relations between the Adeptus Terra and the Mechanicum deteriorated due to political scheming by Fabricator General Kubik. When tensions finally erupted into armed confrontation over custody of a tech priest named Eldon Urquidex, Space Marine forces of the Fist's Exemplar exchanged fire with Mechanicus Skitarii before Kubik backed down and agreed to hand over Urquidex. The incident demonstrated several important principles. First, the Mechanicus was willing to risk armed conflict with Space Marines over matters of principle and internal authority. Second, even though Kubik eventually compromised, he did so on his own terms, rather than being forced to submit by superior military might. Third, the Space Marines involved had to carefully calculate whether pursuing the confrontation was worth the potential damage to their relationship with the Mechanicus. The Moirae Schism, in early M35, showed how Mechanicus' internal conflicts could draw other Imperial institutions into their disputes. When the Forge world Moirae seceded during the Nova Terra Interregnum, the ensuing conflict drew Titan legions, Space Marine chapters, and other forces into a struggle that raged across multiple sectors. The Imperium eventually destroyed Moirae through Exterminatus, but only after 2 millennia of desperate warfare. The schism demonstrated the Mechanicus' ability to leverage its relationships with Space Marine chapters, using those relationships to draw chapters into fighting each other at the behest of their Forge world patrons. The Mechanicus emerged from the conflict weakened but still intact, while several Space Marine chapters suffered devastating losses, with some companies completely destroyed and some Iron Hands clans excommunicated for the positions they took during the conflict. More recently, the campaigns following the opening of the Great Rift have shown Mechanicus capabilities in the Era Indomitus. When Rabuta Guilliman returned to lead the Imperium and called for reinforcements during the Plague Wars, over a dozen Forge worlds including Mars, Risa, Metallica, and Triplex Fall sent substantial forces to Ultramar. The combined strength of these forces, including Titan legions, Skitarii cohorts, and Night Lances, provided critical support that helped turn the tide against Chaos forces. During the Sharadon campaign, Mechanicus forces fought extensive battles against greenskin incursions. Archmagos Belisarius Call, the Mechanicus' most prominent figure in recent Imperial history, deployed armies from Mars and House Tyrannus Night forces to combat threats to Forge world holdings. The campaign illustrated the Mechanicus' ability to conduct sustained military operations across multiple sectors simultaneously, while continuing to fulfill their manufacturing obligations to the wider Imperium. These campaigns also demonstrated Mechanicus' strategic independence. While Mechanicus forces often fought alongside Space Marine chapters and other Imperial forces, they pursued their own objectives according to Mechanicus' strategic priorities. When battles threatened Forge worlds or offered opportunities to recover valuable technology, Mechanicus forces deployed in strength regardless of whether other imperial institutions considered those theatres strategically important. This independence stems from the Mechanicus's unique position within the Imperium. Unlike Space Marine chapters, which theoretically answer to the High Lords of Terror, even if they maintain substantial autonomy, the Mechanicus answers primarily to its own leadership on Mars. The Fabricator General holds a seat among the High Lords, giving the Mechanicus direct input into Imperial strategic planning. But this represents the Mechanicus participating in Imperial governance as an equal partner rather than as a subordinate organization. Throughout Imperial history, the pattern repeats. The Mechanicus pursues its own interests, deploys military force according to its own calculations, and maintains political independence backed by military and economic power that makes other imperial institutions reluctant to force confrontations. Space Marines and other imperial forces cooperate with the Mechanicus because such cooperation proves mutually beneficial, not because they can compel the Mechanicus to submit to their authority. The cold calculus of comparison. Having examined the various aspects of Mechanicus power, their Titan legions, Skitarii forces, Forge world industrial capacity, technological monopoly, control over knight households, advanced weapons, and political independence, we can now return to our original question. Why is the Adeptus Mechanicus stronger than the Space Marines? The answer emerges not from any single comparison, but from the cumulative weight of all these factors. The Mechanicus possesses advantages that compound each other, creating a foundation of power that Space Marines cannot match. In pure military terms, Mechanicus forces can deploy assets that Space Marines lack. A single Imperator-class Titan carries more firepower than an entire Space Marine chapter. A Forge World's Skitarii Legion numbers in the millions, where a chapter fields 1,000 battle brothers. Knight households provide mobile firepower that chapters cannot replicate. The Mechanicus fights with combined arms forces, spanning from individual Skitarii warriors to god engines that reshape battlefields through their mere presence. Space Marines excel at specific types of military operations: rapid deployment, surgical strikes, operations requiring tactical flexibility, and independent decision-making. A Space Marine force can accomplish objectives that Mechanicus forces might struggle with, particularly operations requiring small unit tactics in complex environments. But when raw destructive power matters, when the objective demands overwhelming force rather than surgical precision, the Mechanicus commands assets that chapters cannot match. More fundamentally, the Mechanicus controls the infrastructure that makes Space Marine operations possible. Every piece of equipment a Space Marine wields comes from Mechanicus facilities. Every ship that transports them between stars requires Mechanicus maintenance. Every gene seed implant depends on Mechanicus biological expertise. Space Marines represent the end product of a long supply chain that begins and ends with Mechanicus manufacturing and technical capabilities. This creates an asymmetry of dependency that cannot be overcome through military prowess or tactical brilliance. Space Marines need the Mechanicus to function. The Mechanicus does not need Space Marines. They possess their own military forces, their own manufacturing capabilities, their own means of defending their interests and pursuing their objectives. The comparison becomes even more stark when considering scalability. The Imperium contains approximately 1,000 Space Marine chapters, each fielding roughly 1,000 battle brothers, for a total of around 1 million Space Marines across the galaxy. This seems like a substantial force, until one considers that the Adeptus Mechanicus operates hundreds of Forge worlds, each maintaining Skitarii legions that can number in the millions. Even accounting for the fact that a Space Marine represents a significantly more capable warrior than an individual Skitarius, the sheer disparity in numbers becomes impossible to ignore. And those numbers don't include Titan legions, knight households, or the various other military assets the Mechanicus controls. From a strategic perspective, the Mechanicus holds positions that Space Marines cannot threaten. If every Space Marine chapter in the Imperium somehow united against the Mechanicus, they might be able to conquer individual Forge worlds through sustained assault, but they could not operate those Forge worlds once conquered. could not maintain their own equipment without Mechanicus expertise, and would find themselves unable to sustain military operations as their gear degraded and their ammunition ran out. The Mechanicus, conversely, does not need to militarily defeat Space Marines to neutralize them as a threat. Simple withdrawal of support achieves the same result with less risk and no need for direct confrontation. This asymmetry makes any conflict between the institutions fundamentally unwinnable for the Space Marines. Political power reinforces these military and economic advantages. The Mechanicus speaks with one voice through the Fabricator General and the Synod of Mars. They present a unified political front to the Adeptus Terra and other Imperial institutions. Space Marines, organized into 1,000 independent chapters with no overarching command structure, cannot match this political cohesion. When the Mechanicus wants something from the Imperium, they can leverage their position as indispensable suppliers of technology and equipment. When Space Marines want something, individual chapters must petition as supplicants, hoping their requests align with existing priorities. The Mechanicus shapes Imperial policy from within through their seat on the High Lords. Space Marines can only influence policy from outside through requests and petitions. The comparison reveals itself as fundamentally one-sided once all factors are considered. Space Marines possess advantages in specific tactical situations. They're elite warriors capable of accomplishments that exceed what other Imperial forces can achieve. But these tactical advantages rest on a foundation of Mechanicus manufacturing, Mechanicus technology, and Mechanicus support. Remove that foundation, and the tactical advantages become irrelevant as the chapters gradually cease to function as effective military forces. Conclusion and reflection. In the grim darkness of the far future, power takes many forms. The Space Marines embody one type of power, the power of elite warriors, genetically enhanced and equipped with the finest weapons and armor the Imperium can provide, capable of accomplishing military objectives that would break lesser forces. But the Adeptus Mechanicus embodies a different and ultimately more fundamental type of power. They control knowledge, manufacturing, and technology. They command military forces that span from Skitarii infantry to god engines that stride across battlefields like walking cathedrals. They maintain political independence backed by capabilities that make them irreplaceable to the Imperium's survival. When we ask which is stronger, we must first ask what we mean by strength. If we mean tactical capability in specific situations, Space Marines sometimes prove superior. But if we mean the ability to sustain operations independently, to replace losses, to threaten other Imperial institutions, to reshape the strategic balance through presence or absence, then the Mechanicus stands supreme. The Imperium could, theoretically, survive the loss of every Space Marine chapter. The adjustment would prove painful, and many worlds would fall that might otherwise have been saved. But the fundamental structure of Imperial governance and military power would persist. The Imperial Guard would continue fighting. The Imperial Navy would continue operating. Forge worlds would continue manufacturing. Life, in all its grim horror, would go on. The Imperium could not survive the loss of the Adeptus Mechanicus. Within years, the Astronomicon would fail as its equipment broke down beyond anyone's ability to repair. The Golden Throne would cease functioning, and the Emperor would die. Imperial warships would run out of ammunition and fuel. Imperial Guard regiments would exhaust their supplies. Civilization would collapse into a dark age that would make the Age of Strife seem gentle by comparison. This is the truth that underlies every comparison between these institutions. The Mechanicus has made itself indispensable, and in doing so, has secured power that transcends simple military might. They are the machine upon which the Imperium runs, and machines can always refuse to function. Understanding this helps us appreciate the genius of the Treaty of Mars, signed 10,000 years ago, when the Emperor recognized that conquering Mars would prove more costly than making Mars an ally. That treaty acknowledged a reality that remains true today. The Mechanicus controls technologies and knowledge that cannot be replaced, capabilities that cannot be replicated, power that cannot be denied without destroying the very civilization one seeks to preserve. Space Marines serve as humanity's greatest warriors, and their legends will endure as long as the Imperium stands. But the Mechanicus serves as humanity's technological foundation, and without that foundation, even the greatest warriors become irrelevant. In the eternal war against darkness, both institutions play crucial roles, but when we honestly assess their comparative strength, considering all dimensions of power rather than just martial prowess, the Mechanicus emerges as the stronger force. Not because they can defeat Space Marines in battle, though their Titan legions could certainly accomplish that when necessary, but because they control the infrastructure that determines whether battles can be fought at all. This understanding should not diminish our appreciation for Space Marines or their many heroic actions. Rather, it should expand our appreciation for the complex web of dependencies and relationships that sustains the Imperium. The Space Marines and the Mechanicus both serve humanity's survival, often cooperating rather than competing. But cooperation between unequals always favors those who possess structural advantages, and in the relationship between Astartes and Machine Cult, those advantages lie overwhelmingly with the tech priests of Mars. If you found this exploration enlightening, if it changed how you understand the power dynamics within the Imperium, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. There are so many more topics to explore in the grim darkness of the 41st millennium. So many more hidden truths waiting to be brought into the light. Until next time, remember that knowledge is power, and the Omnissiah protects those who seek understanding.
I hope you guys enjoyed the story. Make sure to hit the subscribe, like, share button, whatever you want. Give me some feedback if there's any. And yeah, sleep well.